You are listening to My Comic Shop History, part of the Flat Squirrel Podcast Network. If you enjoy My Comic Shop History, would like to support the show, and also want exclusive access to extra podcasts, be sure to sign up for my Patreon page. Patreon's a form of crowdfunding where users or patrons pledge low-level monthly amounts in exchange for rewards. Rewards on the My Comic Shop History page include up to 4 exclusive additional podcasts: My Comic Shop Book Club, My Superfan History, the My Comic Shop History After Show, and coming in early 2019, Beyond My Comic Shop. If you enjoyed that 4-part miniseries that I did with Ben Lichtenstein from Zap Comics earlier this season, we're going to be playing around more with that format on the Patreon version of Beyond My Comic Shop. So if you're interested in any of that, or if you just want to support this show and what I do, be sure to head on over to patreon.com/mycomicshophistory. I want to say thank you so much to everyone who has already pledged. Every pledge amount, from $1 to $10 or more, every pledge is greatly appreciated, and it allows me to continue to be able to create this show. A special shout out to our newest VIP patrons, Rob Krieger and Justin Wiggins. Thank you guys, and again, thank you to everyone who has pledged. If you'd like to join, head on over to Patreon now. Hesitation kills. This episode is brought to you in part by a family of film festivals: the Brightside Tavern Film Festival in Jersey City in March, the Point Lookout Film Festival on Long Island in April, and the Hang On to Your Shorts Film Festival in Asbury Park in May. Find them all on Film Freeway, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you're looking to submit a film, use the Film Freeway discount code SJRBRIGHT2019 for Brightside Tavern and SJRHOTYS2019 for Hang On to Your Shorts. In the meantime, visit iTunes or ashareduniverse.com to tune into the official Hang On to Your Shorts podcast. Whether you're a filmmaker looking to get your work out there or a movie lover looking to discover some great independent films, I hope you'll check out these festivals. Welcome to My Comic Shop History. I am your host, Anthony Desiato. This week, we turn our attention to the fascinating world of cosplay. Let me introduce my guest. To my left, I'm very excited to welcome back to the show my wife, Stephanie Desiato.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
And I'm really excited to welcome a brand new voice to the Flat Squirrel Podcast Network. Across from me, we have cosplayer extraordinaire, Peggy Pincurls. Peggy, welcome.
Thank you. Hello. I'm very excited to be here.
I'm so excited to talk to you. So to our listeners, if you were at New York Comic Con at the beginning of October, there's a decent chance you may have seen Peggy as Captain Carter or Agent Carter or Winter Soldier or what was the last one?
The Black Widow.
Or Black Widow, right?
Yes.
You dressed up as 4 different characters over the weekend.
I usually bring 4 different costumes. Depending on how many days the show is, I'll try to bring something different for every day. And I finally have, I think, enough costumes that I can do that with.
That's awesome. And so just by way of very quick recap, so Steph, you and I, last season, we discussed our admittedly limited cosplay experience, but we spent our first wedding anniversary at New York Comic Con 2017.
Oh, fun.
And we dressed, yeah, she's a good sport. And the cosplay was her idea, though. We cosplayed as Matt Murdock and Elektra from the Netflix Daredevil show.
Oh, I wish I'd seen that.
So, and we had a lot of fun, and it was the kind of thing where, you know, I would have done this episode either way, but I think this episode will be better for the fact that we've at least had some experience cosplaying ourselves, because it is, and we'll talk about this obviously, such a different way of experiencing a convention.
Yes, the whole experience and interaction with strangers really is very different once you put on a costume.
Yeah, we were going to do it again, but then you weren't that into what?
No, you said, I'm going on Thursday with Steve Odo, so forget it.
So we discussed this in the previous episode. I just did New York Comic Con one day this year. I went with the former owner of the store where I used to work. We went to the Diamond Retailer breakfast, which was interesting. We talked about that in the last episode. But I said to Steph, I was like, if you want to do another day, I would go again. But you weren't as interested. I think you got your fill.
This past year, we've gone to a few different cons, like at C2E2 and a few smaller shows. So I don't want to say Comic-Con out, but I had gotten my fill for the year, and just the experience at New York Comic Con, which I'm sure we'll talk about more, is so overwhelming. It's so packed that I didn't know that I could do it again a second year in a row quite yet. And we didn't have any costumes planned or prepared at that time. So
there's no shame in that. I can say I'm a 8-year veteran of New York Comic Con itself. Just that show simply, I had a panic attack this year I'm at the point where I hate to say it, I hate Funko Pop for even existing.
Oh, no.
Their booths. And I do collect them. I collect the Funkos of the costumes that I do, or the characters that I do. So I've got, all the Agent Carter ones, of which there admittedly weren't many. Hello, Funko Pop, more of them, please. I've got the Captain America ones. I've got the Winter Soldiers. I have 4 or 5 grumpy soldiers and Black Widows surrounding my television set. And even still, I was just, oh, God, they were so many people. I was in the soldier, so I had the big latex arm on. I'm trying to keep my rifle from hitting people in the face, and I was hiding in the medieval times booth behind the Funko Pop booth, and I just was like, can't do it. My friends found me cringing in a corner, and they saw me, and they were like, oh, they know me well. They're like, she needs a minute. We need a Sprite and 5 minutes away from these people. And then I was fine, but it was just, there was too many people. And I've been doing this for 8 years. I've volunteered at them before. I had an exhibitor badge. I've been an exhibitor for the last 3 years, and I still couldn't handle the clamoring of humans for Funko Pops.
Yeah. It certainly can be overwhelming. I understand.
It's a lot of stimuli.
It's very much a sensory overload if you're not the kind of person who can handle that much noise and pushing and shoving. And it's to be expected. It's not that we don't know what we're going into.
Right.
But I think I was just at a moment where I kind of noped on out of there for a couple of minutes. I don't know if it's embarrassing for me to admit that or not, but
no, not at all. So, I want to get into, your whole cosplay, history and process and all of that. But if you could just kind of lay out for us, in a given year, like how many shows are you going to? How often are you cosplaying? Who are the characters you're cosplaying as?
Sure. Let's see. It's got to be about a dozen shows a year at the least, depending on what the event is, if there's a certain guest that I want to do, if I'm asked to do something like sit on a panel, do photo shoots, that kind of thing. I do like to do photo shoots at shows, and I like to work with about half a dozen different photographers, and I'm always looking to see who's shooting where and who you can form a business relationship with. So yeah, I would say about a dozen shows a year, between 12 and 15 shows a year of varying sizes. I do try to bring different characters to every show. It's kind of tailored on who the audience is and the location. Like I actually began cosplaying in the G.I. Joe fandom. So there is a G.I. Joe costume club. They're called The Finest. They started as Cobra's Finest, and then they included the G.I. Joe, so they just shortened it to The Finest. So that's how I began. And there's a lot of smaller shows, places where there is a concentration of G.I. Joe collectors or cosplayers. So that's more, I bring those costumes when it's more tailored to that particular audience. The bigger shows, I bring my Marvel lineup, which is my favorite.
I saw the G.I. Joe cosplayers at one of the shows we were at.
I wouldn't be surprised if they were probably low. That's our guys. Yes, yeah. That's my garrison, which is the 13th Civil Defense. They are the New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania area. They're actually. I want to say. We have several garrisons. We're kind of like the 501st, the Star Wars cosplayers in that respect. So that the country is divided up into garrisons. We have the UK. We have a UK contingent. There is, I think, one member in Kuala Lumpur. We've got a couple of people kind of scattered across the globe, but it's mostly concentrated in the United States. But so I was doing in the beginning a lot more cons with them. So my first G.I. Joe costume was Scarlet, Shauna O'Hara. So, which was originally how I had my original stage name, which I feel like I'm on Gem. I'm calling it a stage name, but who I also cosplay, by the way. And like those costumes, like I've got, my Gem costumes. We did the Misfits one year. We go to a con called RetroCon down in Oaks, Pennsylvania. It's a lot of fun, but I will save the more quote unquote retro cosplays for something like that at this point. I consider my Marvel lineup my heavy hitters. So I bring them. They're the costumes I've put the most work into at this point.
I mean, you mentioned, I just want to jump back for a second.
Yeah.
You mentioned the photographers you work with.
Oh, yeah.
So photography is actually a passion of Steph's, and she's sort of my personal photographer. When we go to all these comic shops filming and everything, she's always snapping away.
Oh, wow.
Like, what makes for a good photography experience when you're getting photographed as a cosplayer? What do you look for?
I tend to look for a lot of, professionalism is always paramount. There are, unfortunately, as a woman and a cosplayer, you're going to run into certain hurdles or things that you would find less than desirable with certain photographers. And I'm sad to say it, but it does exist. We have to be careful about that kind of thing. I always bring friends with me when I go shoot especially with a new photographer. But I appreciate when they're patient. I have low self-esteem. I have terrible body image issues. I always think I look incredibly goofy in photos. So I'm always appreciative if a photographer is willing to kind of coach me through everything. Direction is very important. They can demonstrate a simple knowledge of their craft very quickly. So I can pick up, in about 2 minutes, whether or not they actually know what they're doing and whether or not they care. Depending, even if they don't know who the character you're cosplaying is, I appreciate when they put the same level of dedication as they would with a character that they personally love.
Right.
Like if I'm, shooting in the Black Widow and, everybody loves the Black Widow. So it's fairly easy to get photographers kind of interested and engaged with that sort of thing. But if I'm in somebody a little more obscure, like one of my G.I. Joe costumes, or there are people that don't remember Agent Carter as anything other than Captain America's girlfriend, and I correct them.
Well, you had a moment on the convention floor.
Oh, God, that was actually hilarious. I was in Agent Carter. I was in my favorite Agent Carter uniform, which was the Project Rebirth scene where Steve is getting the super serum and they chase down the Hydra soldier into the street and she shoots at him in the taxi, that sort of thing. It's my favorite outfit. It's my favorite costume, period, hands down. And it's the one that I feel the most like the character in. So that's what I wore to moderate the Besame Agent Carter panel at New York Comic Con, because I wanted to feel my most confident and to what I thought was look my best. So I was walking across the con floor and some guy yells out, "Hey, it's Captain America's girlfriend." And before I could even stop myself, I turned around and stomped my foot and said, "Excuse me, I am far more than Captain America's girlfriend. Thank you very much." All of the women were very appreciative around me in a little half circle. And I was like, yes. And I just kept going.
Yeah, no, good for you. As well you should.
The character is so important to me. She's so special to me for 1,000 reasons, if there's one. And just to hear it reduced to the soundbite that is Captain America's girlfriend, especially since her TV series and Marvel telling her story was all about how she was so much more than Captain America's girlfriend. It's actually a matter of pride for me to correct people on that.
So, as a female cosplayer, and I'm sure this will come up in a number of the things that we discuss, there's a whole different set of issues. And, last season when we did our cosplay episode, we had our buddy Justin DeVoe. He does a terrific Lobo cosplay.
Oh, was he there this year?
He was.
I saw him.
He was. I'm sure you did. He was
I did.
all over the place.
Oh, yeah. No, he was a terrific Lobo.
Yeah. And so, we had a lot of fun talking to him last year, but as a guy cosplayer, it's a different set of issues and a different type of experience.
Don't get me wrong. They have their own issues and they're just as important.
Yeah,
and,
no,
and
absolutely.
just as difficult to navigate. So
exactly.
I don't want to act like we as women have the monopoly on issues, because we don't.
But it's like we had that perspective. So I'm glad that, we have a different perspective now that we can explore. I think it's important to get into that.
I meant to say, another thing that I appreciate with my photographers is, again, even if they're not recognizing the character, or even when they do, I really appreciate them. I'm very nervous when I do photo shoots all the time. I'm like, what's sticking out? Do I need to suck in more? Are my shoulders pulled back? Is my shield star in the proper position? I will get pictures back and not realize it's been upside down. And then we have to do everything again. And that's like, it's half on me, it's half on the photographer. You've got to check each other. But when they have fun with it, I become so much more relaxed. It's so much more of a fun experience for me. And then I forget that I am self-conscious and I remember that this is fun and I'm supposed to be doing it for fun. And that's so important to me. One of my favorite photographers is Mr. Howard Levy. He's a world of HSL photography. He is a delight to shoot with. And I was shooting Captain Carter with him. It might have been actually one of my first shoots in Captain Carter. And he gives me this very serious look over the camera and he goes, "Be freedom." And I look at him and he goes, "More, be more freedom. Howard actually did my
like,
first.
what do I do with my hands?
I just gave him a look, and then he says, well, look very serious at me. And then he says that, and I kind of gave him a frown. He goes, that's it. But that's what helps me kind of get into the mood and get into the character. And the more comfortable I am with a photographer, the better the photos are going to come out.
Mm-hmm. Right. So now, are these photographers who specialize in cosplay, or they're general photographers?
No, they're general photographers. I think a lot of the work they do, if they're fans, a lot of the work they do is cosplay because they've done a million other things. Howard does headshots. He does, pinup shoots, modeling shoots. I'm thrilled to hire him. I'd like to get some pinup work done because when I'm not cosplaying, I usually do 1940s style pinup. I will do it at work. I mean, everyone at work wants to know how I do my hair, where I get my clothes, and I'm thrilled that they are that comfortable with that side of my life.
I think Justin mentioned a lot of cosplayers and photographers hang out at New York Comic Con in front of the building.
In the
kind
tunnels.
of like,
yeah.
I didn't even know there were tunnels. But
Well, no, it's underneath the walkway. It's if you go out the bottom right door, the section of the building called the Crystal Palace. If you exit the Crystal Palace, you're underneath the overpass, and that is called quote unquote the tunnels.
Oh,
interesting. And that is where the majority of the photo shoots are done. It's kind of a basic background. It's easy to adjust the lighting. Mm-hmm. A lot of the photographers bring light stands and, forgive me, those little parasol things. I don't know what they are. But I've gotten some great shots out there. But I think it's just the most space for them to set up. Mm-hmm. It's a good way for them to adjust the light balance the way that they want it to. There's also a park across the street. It's the subway station, the Hudson Yards subway station for the 7. That's a beautiful location, and I'll often nip over there with one of my photographers to get some really good shots. I've done some shots there with DGW Photography. Howard, World of HSL, did a beautiful shoot for me last year with a gentleman called the Colorado Captain, who rides across the country on his motorcycle for charity as Captain America. So we got some great shots with the motorcycle at the park at Hudson Yards. It's actually one of the most fun shoots I've ever gotten to do. And Howard outdid himself on those shots. They're brilliant.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was great.
You mentioned the day job. What is your day job? What's your alter ego when you're not one of these characters?
I'm actually a bookkeeper. I'm an accountant. I'm not a CPA. I did not study accounting in school, but I am sort of a staff accountant at a boutique office on the Upper East Side. And it's kind of comforting. I really just started working there, and it's very comforting to have coworkers who are aware of the things I do in my personal life, and they're actually interested, and they want to see photos, and they want to talk about it, and they know I have an Instagram, and it's a little scary, especially when I've just debuted a costume such as the Black Widow, where I'm like, oh yes, we were just in a meeting about, taking care of the taxes for this, farm that you guys own. But also here's me in a skin tight black suit with my zip down to, the cleavage. And it's like, so I worried a little bit, but they've been very supportive, and they're very supportive of the 1940s vintage lifestyle that I live. So I come in and they're saying, where did I get my dress? How do I do my hair? What tips can I give them? And that's really, really nice.
That's great.
No, I love to hear something like that, because I know it can be weird when your worlds collide like that.
Yes. I mean, I'm not exactly a huge Batman fan, but in the later years, I have come to an appreciation for Bruce Wayne having to, be himself.
Yeah.
When I'm out on the con floor, people will ask me what I do sometimes, the way that, you do. You're making small talk, you ask what somebody does. And I'll say, oh, I'm an accountant. And they look at me and they say, no, you're not. I said, you're only saying that right now because I'm dressed as Bucky Barnes with lampblack smeared over my face, looking like a hot mess. But I actually can put on a suit and go crunch numbers for 10 hours a day.
Yeah, it's like, I wonder what day job they're expecting.
I do wonder that as well. I'm not sure if they think maybe I'm just... that's a good question. Well, I have had people ask me that even when I'm not in costume, because I do the 1940s vintage look, which is very flattering to me because I think I look like no one that anyone would ever want to put on screen for any reason whatsoever. But that's just me. That's my
No, I have to say, all the photos that I've seen, I haven't seen a huge number, but especially the ones recently from Comic-Con that I took a peek at, you look beautiful in them.
Thank you.
And your costumes are amazing.
That is another thing I check my photographers on. It's a benchmark for them. I will look at a photo from them and think, oh, that doesn't even look like me. And that is a compliment coming from me because I do not like the way I look. So if I look at that and go, oh, is that me? Then I get very excited. And then I'm thinking, what else can I hire them for? Like, what other shoots can we do? What characters do I need to pull out of the closet now?
You know, the psychology of this is really interesting to me. And I know you've mentioned, you know, body image and self-esteem issues. And
I'm sorry if I keep harping on it.
No, not at all. No, I mean, I think it's really interesting because, you know, with
important.
It's important, yeah. But, you know, with cosplay, you're doing something where you're on display like that. So sort of how do you reconcile those two things? Or is it that the cosplay allows you to get past it because you're inhabiting a different type of character?
It's very much the second thing. Yeah. I was very shy as a child. I did not, and I'm very... I don't want to say socially awkward because that term has kind of mutated into something that's turned into an excuse for a lot of people's poor behavior. So I try not to ascribe to that. But I do feel that it kind of brings me out of my comfort zone, which is something that I need because left to my own devices, I will fold into myself and just not be social and not try new things and not talk to new people. So this was very much a way to force myself to do all of those things. And in the beginning, it was, I mean, everybody likes attention. So it was very interesting to me that I was getting attention for this thing that I was doing and that people wanted to talk about the things that I liked to talk about, you know, the comics I like to read and the TV shows I like to watch. So that was a jumping off point to start a conversation with a new person who, you know, and it's not something that's easy for me to do. But eventually, and this is so odd, I'm trying to come up with a way that doesn't sound sort of like a humble brag, but I have had people come up to me more recently and tell me that they follow my Instagram and that I've inspired them to make their own costumes, or I do tend to share personal stories that are connected to the costumes that I wear on my social media, just to kind of make it a little more personal for everyone involved and not just be, here's me in a new costume. Like, this is why this is special to me. I recently posted a Black Widow photo and I was like, this is why Natalia is so special to me. I've done that with Barnes. This is why Bucky means so much to me and why I cosplay. I don't cosplay any character without a very deep reason, at least for me, that connects to me. So when people come up to me and tell me that I've inspired them to make their own costume, or that something I said about how these connect to me personally comforted them, that was a big deal for me. So it's more about like the fact that you, despite every doubt that I have about myself and everything that I worry about, that people still find hope or comfort in the things that I say. So then it's more about not failing those people and continuing to be that standard that's helped them somehow, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So yeah, it's very much about forcing me to, not about being on display so much, but it's like forcing me to, you know, interact with other people instead of just hiding and folding in on myself.
Yeah. Steph, why were you laughing at me when Peggy was talking about the attention aspect?
Because as some listeners may know, Anthony is not a big fan of dressing up in costume, I'll say, or dressing up
that's fair.
in formal attire. But once I convinced him to play Daredevil, or actually Matt Murdock at last year's Comic-Con, which was a relatively simple outfit with a few props that really was his Matt Murdock's signature look.
Yeah, the glasses and the stick get
when
you most of the way there.
People from, you know, across the aisle and walking past were like, it's Matt Murdock, oh, it's Daredevil. I just remember at I think several points he looked at me and said, I like this.
I did. I'm not going to lie.
It is fun. It's kind of validating a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And I think a huge block for us as people and cosplayers, I mean, again, I hate to sound like a total trope, but as people who enjoyed geek things and might have been in the minority for it socially growing up, to then have that kind of validation for it is a little, it's kind of nice.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I mean, this is very self-serving, but you know, when we did the cosplay, I was in the midst of a Kickstarter campaign for the documentary that I'm working on now. Thankfully, the Kickstarter succeeded. Everything
congratulations.
Worked out. Thanks. But one of the reasons we went to Comic-Con was I had postcards for the project and the Kickstarter, and I wanted to hand them out. And, you know, behind the mic, I'm pretty comfortable. But in person, I was very shy as a child, and there's some of that's still with me. So for me to just go up to people and say, hey, I'm running a Kickstarter, here's a card, that would have been challenging for me. But since we were cosplaying, people came up to us, asked to take photos with us, and then that door was open and I was like, oh, hey, by the way, here's this. It was significantly easier.
Mm-hmm. That makes perfect sense. I've worked with some of my costume clubs on charity drives. We did one with the Finest every year. I'm sure they're going to do it again next year. We called it the Girls of the Finest campaign. It was a cosplay calendar, and it was 12 months, different cosplayers for every month. But we would pick a different military-related charity every year to, give the proceeds to. We had I think it was an Indiegogo. And we started with Wounded Warrior Project. We moved on to the USO. And for the last couple of years, we've been doing a great charity. It's called Canines for Warriors. It is an organization that trains service dogs to then be service dogs for veterans. And they're fantastic to work with. Everyone was actually fantastic to work with. But it is a lot easier, as you say, to kind of do the pitch when people are coming up to you asking you for a photo or chatting with you. It's very be like, oh, the reason we're here is here's a thing.
First of all, chills, because you love hair, you love makeup, and you love dogs. So that's
my dream.
That's my checklist.
Yeah,
my dream is to have a corgi. My dream is to eventually have a corgi. I have. I'm a geek. I'm not gonna lie. I write fan fiction in my spare time. It calms me down. And between my fan fiction page on the Archive of Our Own site and my Facebook, I came up with this silly little headcanon, I guess, where Steve and Peggy adopt a corgi and its name is Brooklyn. So it's like, never think I'm cool. I tell the people that come up to me and say, oh, I follow your Instagram. And I was like, don't worry. Please don't ever think I'm cool. I'm so nerdy.
Well, maybe on that note, right? The big question I'm sure people are wondering, and I'm wondering, is how you got into this. And so, I guess to start with, as far as just your affinity for these characters, did you come to them through the comics or through the movies or some other way?
And a little bit of both, actually. I actually went to my first con as a volunteer. I volunteered at New York Comic Con. I want to say it was 2010, maybe, or 2011, because I wanted to see what it was like and to see if I wanted to go as a guest. So I volunteered for the 4 days, and I worked celebrities' lines, and Ms. Katie Sackhoff patted me on the rear end and said, good job. And I saw all the costumers.
And how do you even volunteer those? Is it just through the Read Pop site?
I did. This was almost 10 years ago at the time. But I just kind of went through the Read Pop site and I signed up to be a volunteer. And they make you go to a little meeting. I'm sure it's bigger. At the time, you could get 3-day passes lickety split. It wasn't like it is now. It was much, much smaller.
Right.
So, and I've had an exhibitor badge. I've been lucky enough to have an exhibitor badge for the last couple of years. So I haven't had to deal with the ticket queue.
And how are you getting in as an exhibitor?
If I'm working a booth or doing a panel, you get a badge for that. And I know enough exhibitors who I'm lucky enough that they will, if they want me to do something for them, they pay in trade. Right. So you get the badge. And for me, it's worth it. And I do love helping my friends who are exhibitors. I enjoy it. So that way everyone wins.
Yeah, well, that can be a big thing for a booth to help attract people, draw people in as they're walking by to see a cosplayer there.
Well, right? I don't even do that in cosplay. It's usually just kind of stalking or running sales. This year it was definitely the most special experience I've ever had, representing Besame Cosmetics for their Agent Carter line and moderating the panel. I'm still so flattered and honored that they asked me to do that.
Yeah, that's so cool.
It was amazing. It was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And between that and the largely successful debut of the Black Widow costume, I think it was my best con yet. But I started that as the volunteer, and I had such a good time that weekend that I called up my best friend. Again, on Instagram, she is Shazza Versus. She is my cosplay ride or die buddy, and we've been doing this together for as many years as I've been doing it. And we were friends in university. And I said, we gotta go to this. This is so fun. We gotta do this. So next year we went one day, and we had very simple, they call it a closet cosplay. It's things that you could just kind of yank out of your closet. I think the most intricate part of that costume for me was my vest was custom embroidered for me because I was Claire Redfield from the Resident Evil games. So it was very, very simple costume for me. And she was Katniss Everdeen from the Hunger Games. And that was before the movies had come out. So she was novel Katniss. She always is ahead of the curve on everything. So she's brilliant. So we went for the one day. we came back with shopping bags full of crap. And we had so much fun. And there's so many photos of every cosplayer we ran into, tracked down, chased and asked for a photo politely, always politely. But we had such a good time that we were like, oh, next year we've got to go all 3 days. And that was back when it was only 3 days. Thursday night was pro night. And then the con was Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Now there is no pro night as far as I know, unless it's Wednesday. Thursday is the new Friday, and it's packed to the gills, all day, every day.
I know. I feel like it's only a matter of time before they follow San Diego's lead and introduce like a Wednesday preview night or something.
Yes. Thursday used to be the preview night for New York Comic Con, and then it would start officially on Friday. And I'm sure that's actually definitely what's going to happen with
I feel
them.
like it's inevitable.
And then it just kind of grew after that. The first serious costume I wore the year after that was my G.I. Joe Scarlett O'Hara cosplay. I was recruited to the finest from that costume. And then it was more that I was going to more than one show. And I was like, oh, there's more than one show? There's shows in other places? Like I knew about San Diego, but I didn't know that there were smaller cons all over the place. I didn't know about C2E2. I didn't know about Emerald City.
But actually, just to back up though, so as far as again, just getting into these characters in the first place, how did that start for you? Like, what made you even want to volunteer at a show?
I don't even really remember what it was that made me want to do it. I do remember we had recently seen Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which if you want to talk obscure Chris Evans roles, it's probably one of my favorites. He was Lucas Lee. I want to put all of the Lucas Lee movie posters in my bathroom at the house because I feel like that would be the funniest place for them. But so we had seen that, and I loved all of the pop culture references in it, and we were just very kind of hyped up and excited. And my best friend had gotten me tickets to see, it was a Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, which I know is a very polarizing property.
That was actually when we started dating, that was actually one of the first things we did.
Really? And I'm not going to lie, I'm very easily amused. I enjoyed it. So we had done that, and I enjoyed the hell out of it. And then we were just kind of so inundated at the time with all of our geek stuff, so to speak, that I was like, oh, this is the next logical step, is there's whole shows out there for people who enjoy this kind of thing. Like, let's see what this is like. So I kind of told myself I was going to do like an undercover mission and to see if it was something we wanted to experience. And P.S., 8 years later, I'm on a podcast talking about all of it with you guys. So,
well, no, and that's an important point that, these Comic-Cons, and this has come up in past episodes, they've obviously extended far beyond just comics, and they really encompass pop culture generally, which is something that for some of the hardcore comic fans is not always well received. And I think sometimes cosplay gets lumped in with that. I mean, have you ever
very
gotten
much so
any sense from the people around you or online of this kind of this pushback against the cosplay at the shows?
I have seen and heard, sadly, a bunch of, and I'm not going to lie, I have a dim view of the people that espouse this opinion, that cosplay is ruining Comic-Cons for everybody and it's ruining it for the real fans. And I'm just like, I'll get you a Kleenex, you dope. I was a punk rock kid in university. I loved punk bands. I loved ska. And there was always this kind of underlying thing that if your favorite band was releasing things through like drive-through records or has a small label, then it was okay. But the minute that they got an actual record deal, then you were like, oh, the sellouts, this is terrible. And I'm thinking, but like, do you want more records or don't you? Like, it's fine if they're starving to death and then you can all throw your fists in the air, damn the man, save the empire kind of a thing. But the minute that they actually succeed, which is what you ought to want as a fan, then suddenly it's like they're sellouts and this is no good and
it's not cool anymore.
No, exactly. And when you are 18, as I was, I totally understand, wanting to rebel against literally everything. But as an adult now, I'm 35 years old, I see the kind of the childishness of that thinking where it's, you can be a little disappointed in the direction something's going. And personally, I don't love how New York Comic Con has, those bloody car people out there. Like, okay, you put your cars in the Transformers movie. Do you need a whole booth on the floor for this? Like, it goes both ways. And
right, everybody has something that they're looking for, right? Looking to get out of these shows.
Absolutely.
Right?
And you do have to make it, there is room for everyone here. And cosplay has injected a huge, new life into the industry. Comics, I love them very much, but comics are not great at keeping their finger on the pulse of things all the time. They're really not. I mean, okay, let's bring up DC for a second. And let me know if I'm getting a little too raw with this. But
no, hey, have
DC
at it.
had a recent controversy, as I'm sure you're aware of, with a certain comic and a certain panel and a certain thing.
Even Steph knows about this.
Stephanie's laughing. So, but no, I mean,
we're talking about
Batman. Yeah, we are talking about Bat Penis. And I originally thought it was a joke. I had to see we were reading The Onion. And and then when I said, oh, you know what? And I was just like, okay, good. And a lot of the people I knew, retailers, I mean, men and women alike, were like, all right, good. And then DC, censored it and recalled it. And it's just, I'm sure I'm a broken record and I'm repeating what everyone I know has said at this point, but it says, okay, we show Bat Penis for one printing and it's horrifying. We have to recall this. This is terrible. Let's do a 25th reprinting of Harley Quinn's nipples in something else. Like, it's such a double standard. It's atrocious in every way, shape, and form. And I'm so disappointed in the industry for this. So I think it's important for things like cosplay and things like the Marvel Cinematic Universe to sort of give everybody a fresh perspective on things, because if we just leave it up to, the comics industry alone, or the fans that have been doing this for 40 years alone, you're only going to get one perspective on it. The kids that collected comic books, when they were my age, when I first started reading comic books, I was 9 years old, like, they've all grown into middle-aged adults right now. We might need some fresh blood in here.
Yeah.
It's, it takes all kinds.
It does. I mean, I guess, so I kind of have two thoughts on this whole, some of this criticism of cosplay and its impact on the convention scene specifically. As a comic book fan myself, and Steph, this, like, we've heard this from a lot of people we've interviewed for the documentary talking about how they got into comics and how, again, it's really only been in this past decade plus where, the movies have been so prominent and comics have been so much more accepted. It's like, I remember even growing up, not that they were so stigmatized, but it's like, there certainly weren't a lot of people in my class, for example, who were fellow comic book fans. It's like, I didn't have that. That's why it was such a big deal for me when I started working at the comic shop. It's like, oh my God, like, I can finally talk to people about this. So I think comic fans in general know what it's like to be part of something that's not widely accepted. So I feel like that should make you more accepting of other things.
You would think. And sometimes it does. And other times it so blatantly doesn't that I'm goggling at these people saying, like, do you not remember how it was when we were younger? Do you not remember how awful you felt?
What is the major complaint about the cosplay? Like, is it that you're taking photos in the aisles and they can't walk? Like, what?
I wish it were that simple. It's unfortunately, and I hate to be this polarizing myself, but it seems to be a lot of, gatekeeping.
Okay.
Women aren't true fans. They're just wearing bathing suits. You don't actually know anything about Doctor Who. You don't actually know anything about Star Wars. You're just doing it for attention. And it happens to men too. You don't know anything about this and you're just doing this to, get attention. And that applies to both men and women. And 9 times out of 10, it's not true. And it's just a waste of everyone's time. And it's just showing, if you're the antagonist, how entitled you are. Entitlement is a terrible, rampant problem in the community. And not just cosplayers, with comic fans, with movie fans. I mean, I've had people accuse me of, saying that I only really understand the Marvel Cinematic Universe and I never read the books. And then I've got to talk about Capwolf, which, look, I'm not going to lie. I enjoy Capwolf, but I'm not going to say it was good.
But so, like, that's what happens. Like, you'll get, and is this in person or online?
Both.
But you get it in person too.
And I will say, even as a cosplayer of Agent Carter, who not everybody really knows about or knows too much about, and I've been gotten some blowback because, oh, well, I only understand how she, was in the MCU and it wasn't like that in the books. And I said, well, they grafted most of Sharon Carter's backstory onto Peggy, which is why Sharon Carter didn't really work in the movies. They didn't really give her anything to work with because so much of her backstory had been cannibalized for Peggy. But Peggy Carter, in her own right, even in the comic books, was a fantastic character. She was in an interracial relationship when that was not a thing that you wrote about or talked about or anything. And there were characters in the comic that were upset at her for that. There were people in real life that were upset at her for that. Like, that's a big deal. I mean, that's important. So to have people say you don't understand this character in a comic convention where there's so many tables to flip. I don't know why anyone would say that to me when I was within flipping distance of a table. But
And then so you feel like you have to, like you're put in that position where you have to defend your
honor.
It does suck when you feel it does suck to be put in the defensive position because you're just doing this for fun. We're all doing this for fun. And when you have to immediately get into a goalie's crouch because somebody, you know, feels the need to defend their, you know, personhood with this is why I'm better at this than you. And I'm just like, really? We could all be reading a book right now.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I respect you that you have the knowledge of the history of the characters and they have deeper meanings and it's not, I don't even want to say just for, you know, oh, you like the way she looks and you picked her.
There's but that
even
too.
Even if it was, I mean, I think probably Justin, has said like it brings characters to life. It's like usually, I mean, before the movies and television shows became popular or were even being made, typically it's you're seeing these characters on a page, but then a cosplayer can bring the person to life, even though, yes, you know, it's not actually Captain America or Agent Carter or Spider-Man, but the person, this being is living and breathing in front of you when you know, never thought that was possible, that you get to meet Spider-Man. Or Superman, whoever it is. So it's like, why hate on that? Even if the person's like, I think the spandex is cool and I want to be Spider-Man. What's wrong with that?
That's exactly it. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's as simple as that. And I have this knowledge of these characters because I love them so much. But at the same time, when I am defending myself against whoever is coming up against me, and it's thank you very much for the compliment, but you say like, oh, it's great you have this knowledge. But I want to say to these detractors, I don't know this for you. I didn't get this knowledge to simply defend against you in the event that you came up and kind of pushed back at me about it. That's not why I learned this fact. Like I already knew this fact. I used to, when I lived out on Long Island, I had a comic book shop that I frequented. I had a pull list there. It was around the time Matt Fraction's Hawkeye had first started to come out, and that still remains one of my favorite books. That was brilliant. And I was reading a Star-Lord comic. I would just kind of hang and read. I studied taijutsu with the owner. So we were friends, and I kind of would just hang around and read. And then this guy came up, and he said, "Oh, she's reading a Star-Lord comic. You know, it's probably just because the Guardians of the Galaxy movie came out." And I sort of lowered my book just so my eyes were showing, and the proprietor gives me a look, and then he gives the guy a look, and he goes, "What can I ring up for you today?" Like trying to ooch him out the door, and then he says to me, you know, "Oh, I bet your favorite character is Captain America." I'm like, "Oh, really? You saw my handbag and my wallet that have the shield emblazoned on both of them? Like, however did you guess that? Genius." But so it's just like, "Yes, Captain America is my favorite. Thank you." He's like, "Well, you know, he wasn't even a founding member of the Avengers." And I said, "I do know that. He showed up in issue 4. I said, "I also know that the Winter Soldier exists because Bucky Barnes was killed off screen and it made a young fan so angry that years and years later, we now have the Winter Soldier because Ed Brubaker was so mad that happened." So he gives me a look, and then the proprietor looks at him. We all look back and forth, and the proprietor just says, "Son, just don't." Like warning him against me. And then I said, I gave John a look, and he goes, "No, just do what you have to do." So I said, "Let me guess, you're upset that Ant-Man wasn't in the Avengers movie." And all I had to do was say that, and he went on an absolute tear about how Ant-Man was a founding member of the Avengers. And finally I just shut him down with something I'm sure a lot of people these days do know, where I was like, pretty sure Marvel and Disney weren't able to figure out how spousal abusing characters should have fit into their children's movie about a team of superheroes. And he just kind of put everything down. I said, "Bye now, you have a good day."
I mean, it's very disappointing to me that you've had really like a stereotypical experience, right? Where
it's disappointing and amusing in equal parts, I feel.
But it's like that type of like that's what you get, like versions of that on The Big Bang Theory. It's like a woman walks into the store. They're a little bit better now. They have the female employee.
Yeah, I loathe The Big Bang Theory for reasons that are mostly attributed to this mindset.
Yeah, no, I know exactly. But like that, what you just described, like that's what we've seen variations of,
and
like
we've
on
heard
Big Bang.
from an employee at a comic shop, a female employee at a comic shop, that says a customer will come in and quiz her. Like,
it's atrocious. I don't doubt that for a second.
Yeah, that's really, really unfortunate.
And I'm not the only one with stories like this, as you said. I mean, everyone's got one, and men and women alike have these stories.
Mm-hmm. And at least you had the person behind the counter who was at least with it, but that's not always the case.
No,
either.
It is not. I mean, I sort of was kind of amused and glad that he sort of gave me my head and let me run on that, because that was a customer. Like, I didn't want to lose him a sale, but he had my back on that, and I appreciated it.
Yeah, no, I mean, so like when you are quizzed and you're forced to prove, that you are a fan and that you know what you're talking about. I mean, when you're able to kind of go back at them, what type of response do you get? Does that kind of shut them down?
A lot of the times it does shut them down. Sometimes they'll try to redouble and see if they can come up with a question that'll, stump me. I feel that the way to combat this best is to not turn the behavior back on these people. If I say to somebody, oh, have you seen ABCD? And they say they haven't, I said, oh, well, you're in for a treat if you do end up reading it or watching it. Like, this is my favorite thing about it, because it's best to just kind of
kill them with kindness.
Basically. And I do want to share. We do this because we want to share what we love. So why shouldn't we want to bring new things to people or learn new things ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely, I just don't understand like this gatekeeping. Like why you would want to keep people out.
Is it more of a, like, because as we were talking about before, it's like being a kid and into comics wasn't, back in the 80s or 90s, it wasn't cool yet, right? Like it is now. There wasn't this huge movement, especially with the movies. So it's like, why, having that feeling and then as an adult making other people want to feel that way. I mean, is that just like the shit falling down the tree? Like,
I think it's very possible.
It was hard for me,
is.
so I'm going to make it hard for others.
I think that being bullied can go one of two ways. You either learn and you learn how it made you feel and you try your best to kind of stamp it out wherever you can, or you end up becoming the bully yourself. And I feel like that's actually because I am attuned to the characters that I love so much, one of my favorite scenes in Captain America is Steve Rogers asks Dr. Erskine, why did you pick me? And he says, well, the strong man doesn't appreciate his strength, he's always had it, but the weak man appreciates strength.
I get chills as you quote that.
And he talks about the serum that way, very much like how the creation of the Red Skull versus how it's going to work. He knows how it's going to work for Steve, but he says it amplifies. Good becomes great, bad becomes worse.
Right.
And I really feel that that's kind of the case with that, because the weak man who's been in those bad positions appreciates the value of strength. Somebody who's had it all their life, they don't know. They don't know what it's like not to have that.
Yeah, I mean, like, maybe this is like the lawyers and us, like trying to get a sense of what the other side of the argument is. I mean, the other thing I could maybe point to is, some of these fans feel like they put in their dues, like they earned their fandom through these decades of reading, whereas
experts
people
and
who
decades of getting picked on,
right? And then people who like watch the movie and now it's accepted and like they haven't suffered the way. Like, I don't know.
No, I think there's a lot of validity to that. That observation. Yeah. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm saying that there is a lot of validity to that observation.
But and even again, like I really, for the stores that we've gone to, I think we've met a lot of great retailers, but we have heard stories from people who have gone into stores and they haven't had a good experience with the people working there, the owners, and that too. It's like you're running a business. Sell a comic to whoever comes in, whether they watch the movies, they read whatever it is. It's like they want to buy something from you.
One of my favorite things about the shop I used to get the pull list from is sometimes I'd go in there on a random day and say, "Hey, John, what's good?" And he'd give me to he'd direct me to an older book or something that was new that he thought was really great. It's how I found. I read a wonderful Green Arrow book. It was called The Longbow Hunters. That was the name of the arc. I think that book's fantastic, and I'm not even a huge DC fan, and that was on his recommendation. It's how I found a wonderful series. It's called Black Sad. It's a noir detective story where all of the characters are animals. And it's brilliantly drawn. It's beautiful. It's just a wonderful story. And those are things where I'd go in and say, "What's good?"
Yeah.
And he would tell me what he liked. And I'd pick a new book.
I mean, going back to the convention side of this and some of the pushback against cosplay, the other thought I have on this, and this came up a couple of episodes ago, I had Vincent Terzolo from Metropolis Collectibles, and, I was talking to him about how, people complain that there's so many shows, so many conventions. And I think his point was good. He was like, the market will determine what's too many shows. And I think the same thing for cosplay. It's like, if this weren't something that were working, if they weren't selling tickets, like maybe you would go in a different direction. Like clearly there's an audience and an appetite for this.
I agree completely.
And there are other types of shows, like the next episode, just as a quick tease, it's going to be kind of like our old school con edition, because there's a show in Clifton, New Jersey, that's like real old school show. I haven't been, but I've heard about it, and it's like dealers with long boxes of comics, and like that's it.
Yep.
And so if you want that type of experience, there's a show for you.
there's a show for everyone. I mean,
Right.
there's anime cons, there's My Little Pony cons, there's Doctor Who themed cons, there's Walker Stalker. Walker Stalker owns actually quite a few shows. They also own Heroes and Villains, I believe. So, which I've only been to the one. Not a huge. I like The Walking Dead, but not nearly as much as everybody who goes to Walker Stalker. And I get that. Like, that show's not for me. It's not tailored to, you know, my interests. I will say on the convention side that every single, you know, thumb war I've had to have with somebody who's gatekeeping me and thought I was a quote unquote fake geek, it's all completely obliterated on the other side when I have a small child come up and, you know, want a photo. I had a little girl, the first time I ever wore my Captain America, and I do my Captain America and my Winter Soldier. I don't crossplay, but I also don't make the costumes super feminine. I just wear what I think the character would have worn, except they are a woman. So I was a little worried about Captain America because my wig, it's a custom wig. It's by Hero Hair. It's a long blonde ponytail. And I was worried about small children being confused by a girl Captain America or possibly getting blowback from kids on that, because I can deal with adults getting up in my face all day. A child, I'd be terrified and heartbroken. So I was wandering around with my shield, and somebody tapped my sleeve, and it was a woman, and she says, "I'm so sorry to bother you." And I'm like, "Oh, don't do this to get ignored. Like, you're not bothering me. How can I help you?" She's like, "My little girl has been following you around for 3 hours. Like, she wants a photo with you." I said, "Oh, okay, fine." So she had a Pokemon stuffed toy in her hand, and I will say I know very little about that. I was a little too old when that came out, so it was like I know very little about it. And I said, "Hey, hi, what's your name?" And she told me her name. And I said, and who's this? She holds up her toy and goes, "Evie!" Like, really cute. So we took the photo, and I asked her mother for permission to put it on social media, obviously, because she was a minor. And she said, "No, here's my Instagram. You can tag us in it." And then the little girl hugs me and says, "I love Captain America." And I was just like, I melted into a puddle of Peggy. And I got up to go meet my friend at another booth. And this little boy was hanging over his mom's shoulder, and he had to be 4. And he waves at me and says, "Hi, Captain America." I was just like, okay, it's good. Like, I was just,
all is right with the world.
All is right with the world. I had 2 little girls, a little Ray and a little Jin or so, in the restroom. I was fixing my tie. I was Agent Carter. I didn't even have my green jacket on. My hair was up, and I had the khaki shirt, and I was fixing my tie because no matter how many times I do it, I will be unsatisfied with my first 3 attempts at a Windsor knot. And then usually I'll finally get out in the 4. And the little Jin or so tugged on my skirt and said, "Are you Agent Carter?" And I was like, "Oh, yes, I am." And so I told them they looked great, and then we took a photo. And I didn't even have the jacket on. And I said to their mother, I was very impressed that they figured it out when I wasn't in the full uniform. And she looks at me and goes, "Oh, they love Agent Carter." And that's great. They're so little, that's important. I was the Winter Soldier once. The first time I was the Winter Soldier, I didn't have my good, quote unquote, my good build. I have a full latex arm for the Winter Soldier. It's very flexible. I have great range of motion in it. It photographs beautifully. People don't believe I can move it until they come up to me, and then I just do whatever with it. And they want to touch it. They're impressed. I love the thing. So I had a 3D printed plastic arm for my first incarnation of Bucky. Also a very good arm, but no range of motion whatsoever. So I was having a bit of the scars on my left arm up and down are all from different arms for Bucky.
Oh my God. So, that's commitment.
Yeah. So I was walking around, and I had, my Uzi and my con-safe guns. Obviously, none of mine are actually functional. So I was walking around at a booth, and this man was like, "Oh," and he's like, "Can I touch it?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And he knocks on it. It's 3D printed plastic, and he turns to his kid, who was about 5 or 6, and he says, "Oh, hey, Logan, look at this." And the kid looks at me and goes, "Oh my God." And I gave him a thumbs up and flashed him a wink, and he was adorable. I mean, then they wanted to hang off of it. So I was like, yeah, picking him up with my arm. It was very cute. And that makes up for every jerk who has come up to me. Like, all of that, when you make people happy that way, and they see, as you said, their favorite characters walking around, even though they know it's just us dressed up, but to see it up and about and walking around, that makes up for every fool that has come up to me and tried to give me a push,
Yeah, I mean, I just love that a little girl or little boy can see that Captain America or Winter Soldier just as easily could have been a woman.
Yes.
It's like,
that's so comforting to me, because I really do worry about that kind of thing. And that is intensely comforting to know that they're okay with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned, the gentleman coming up and asking if he could touch your arm.
Oh, yeah.
We see the signs at conventions now all the time.
Cosplay is not consent.
Yeah.
It's very important.
I mean, what types of experiences have you had on that front? Have you found that people need to be...
No, I've been much luckier than a lot of my colleagues on that. I am again, I don't do this to be ignored. I'm very aware people are going to come up for me. I will never say no to a photo. I see those memes where it's cosplayers complaining like, don't bother me while I'm eating or something. And I'm like, I'm here to be fun and bring this fun to other people. I'm never going to say no to a photo unless I'm being carried out on a stretcher. So I'm not going to say no. So I'm very, as long as people are respectful and if they ask if they can, I had a guy once dressed like the Hulk who asked if he could pick me up. And I said, fine, because you asked first. Like, you can't just go in and try to do something like that. But no, people ask if they can touch my arm. I say, as long as you ask first, there's probably not a lot I'm going to say no to. Obviously, I would never do anything inappropriate. And there is one thing that I will always refuse. As Carter or the Black Widow or the Winter Soldier, I have been asked to point a weapon at some people I'm taking photos with. I will never point a weapon at someone in a photo, ever. Not ever. And one of my friends actually wants to do a small panel on proper way to photo shoot with fake weapons because so many people seem to not know the gun etiquette on that. Huh. And we're like, yeah, unless keep your booger hook off the bang switch, please. But it's a thing, and everyone's just learning.
Right.
And we're like, it's one of those things where you teach as you go along. But no, I will never point a gun at anyone, even in for show.
Well, maybe on a more positive note, so when you're in costume, are you in character as well?
I try to be, yes. I think it's more fun for me. I don't necessarily do that for other people, but it's more fun for me. And I do spend a lot of my time doing quote unquote good guys. So, because Agent Carter is my most prominent character. She's what I'm most known for. She's the one I have the most fun being. But I have to say, and I've done Captain America. I'm between suits right now, which is the reason I haven't brought Cap out a lot this year, because it's difficult. I buy my suits for Captain America. I'm not able to make those yet, as it's a little out of my wheelhouse sewing wise. I'm self-taught. I'm a self-taught seamstress, so I learn every time I do.
Yeah, that's something I want to get into, is how you're actually creating these costumes.
Absolutely. But I'm between suits because these manufacturers they're great, but they're so used to making costumes for men. And we as women are just built differently. It doesn't matter how many measurements you send if you're not accounting for the fact that I have hips. We're not going to be able to do this. Like my Infinity War Bucky is currently in production, and I've only purchased the jacket because I do not trust them to make these trousers in a way that they will fit me. So I'm going to have to make my own trousers, which will be fun because trousers and suit jackets are the things I have the least experience with. So that's going to be fun. But so I haven't brought Captain America out a lot this year, which I really regret doing. Not regret, but I wish I could have done it more. But when I'm Agent Carter, I try to be very much in character because she's actually a lot like me. It's very easy to be in character as Carter because I do the pinup things. I try to be a polished, classy lady like my mother, rest her soul. So it's things like that. But then I will say, if I bring out characters like the Black Widow or the Winter Soldier, I have a version of Killer Frost from The Flash that I do.
Yes, I do
that. Killer
yeah.
Frost. Killer Frost got stolen out of my car, sadly. So I was going to have to remake the corset anyway. So it was not the worst thing in the world. That I was most sad to lose the wig, which luckily was store-bought and not one of my 4 customs. But so Killer Frost got stolen out of the car. So I was like, I'll have to remake that costume.
That's terrible.
But
where? Was it at a convention? Or
no, it was in front of my apartment.
Jeez.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I'm kind of confused as to, they just grabbed a couple of bags and I'm like, okay, you got my washing and you got Killer Frost and you got some other crap. What did you think you were going to get? I don't know what you were expecting, but
if only you could have been there when they started pulling the stuff out. Like, what
the hell is this? I thought about that. I was like, I wonder if they're pulling all this stuff out going, what the hell?
Is there anything that's like so clearly identifiable that if you saw a Killer Frost cosplay at a convention,
unfortunately,
you'd be like,
no. I actually gave my shopping list to about 6 other Killer Frosts because I found a really good corset that was very close to the screen accurate one that she had. So I was happy to share. I believe as a cosplayer that we should share our information. And I know there's a lot of cosplayers out there who don't. And I'm disappointed at that fact, actually, because we're all doing this together. And I'm in a couple of really great communities on Facebook. I'm part of the Agent Carter cosplay community. I just recently joined the Black Widows, the Winter Soldiers, the Captain Americas. Everyone is so helpful, and they're great at sharing information. And I don't understand cosplayers who are like trying to guard trade secrets, because you don't own any of this. We're just doing this for fun. And I mean, human beings will make anything into a competition, literally anything. So, I'm insecure. I get jealous sometimes when someone's got like, really good handle on something. And I'm like, oh, I wish I could do that. It's not so much I dislike this person for doing it, but I'm just like, oh, I wish I had that, whatever they've got, like that oomph that they can do. And it just, it helps me work harder on myself to try to get where I want to be. But so I gave about 6 Frosts the information. So I was like, I wouldn't even know if it was mine, because you'd probably know if it was mine, because there'd be white body paint smeared all over everything, because I will say she's a pain with the body paint. I had to do, but I was asked to do in DC, one of the first times I wore her, on the news that morning, they wanted to bring some of the convention attendees there. So my friend called me up and said, how fast can you get into Killer Frost? And I was like, oh, Maggie.
How long does something like
Killer
that take?
Frost takes about, I guess I would say like an hour and 30, because of the body paint. And it depends. If I'm just planning to keep her jacket on, it's not a huge issue, because it's just my face and my hands. But if I'm taking off the jacket, the corset exposes quite a bit.
Right.
So I do like to be accurate with the body paint for everything. And I'm doing this by myself. A lot of cosplay, a lot of the hurdles I've run into with physical logistics is just doing this by myself. Sometimes I hooked up my corset to a doorknob and, ran away from it to try to get it. And let me tell you, that works. Depending on the kind of doorknob you have, like round doorknobs don't work so well for me, but the kind that are handles wow, I got a 2-finger width lace up on that corset with a doorknob, but it's by myself.
That's tough.
You don't think about it.
Yeah, well, like Justin, like he has his team.
He has a team, yeah.
For Lobo, I can imagine. Yeah. Yes, God, I wouldn't take on that body paint job. Not if I was doing it to myself.
Does it give you any more sympathy for the actors?
God, yes. Being in the suits, I do remember there was an interview that Chris Evans, Mr. Evans, did not like the suit for the Avengers. There was very little range of motion. It was too hot. We all thought he looked goofy in the cowl, which is why almost nobody cosplays that suit. So I do remember that. And I got into, I think I had a UD Replicas Captain America suit once upon a time. That was a full motorcycle suit, full leather. That was so uncomfortable. I was hot. It was stiff. There was no range of motion. The first time I was in the Winter Soldier, I got out of the arm and my friends had me in like an ice bath. And I was in it for about 12 or 13 hours, which I'm sure nobody would have recommended, but I'm also insane and I really like to cosplay. So I was like, this is great. Let's do this. They got me back to the Airbnb and they're like, Peggy, we should probably get you to like an emergency room for this. It's looking very bad. Your arm is very swollen. There's blood. Oh. We should do something. And I'm like, we're in Chicago. Get deep dish. And they were like, no, Peg, we're calling the hospital. I'm like, breadsticks. I was just kind of like hanging out in a bucket of ice.
That's a physical toll though, that, you don't really think about that.
I passed out at C2E2. I was not in the Soldier. And this was 100% my own fault. Let me preface this story with it was 100% my own fault. I was Agent Carter for all 4 days because we were doing an Agent Carter panel there. My feet were killing me because I'm in high heels all weekend. I took 4 aspirin at midnight. I forgot that I did this instantly. I did not eat or drink the next day, and the blood drive is giving out really cool Infinity War shirts. So me and another Peggy were like, ooh, Infinity War shirts. And I love to give blood. I think it's a great thing. I think everyone should do it if they can. So I was double corseted, and right at the end of my pint, the room filled up with snowflakes, and I think I said like hello or excuse me or something, like tried to get somebody's attention. And the next thing I know, I wake up and there is a ring of nurses around me, and they don't know my name. They know my character. So they're fanning me with my own fedora saying, Agent Carter? Agent Carter? Are you okay? Do you want a Rice Krispie treat? I was like, yeah. So they kept me there for like 40 minutes because they did not trust me to get up and walk on my own power, which they shouldn't have trusted me. I was a wreck. And every time somebody passed, I looked very pathetic. So they brought me juice and Rice Krispie treats, and they gave me the shirt. And I said, but were you able to take the whole pint so you can like actually use it? And they were like, oh no, yeah, you're great. You're a good bleeder. I was like, thank you.
goodness.
That's like out of a movie. It's
But
like you wake up and they're calling you Agent Carter. It's like, I've become her.
I almost wanted to be like, I see Steve. He looks glorious. But it was 100% my own fault because I go too hard. And everyone knows I know I go too hard.
No, I give you a lot of, I mean, that's a tough thing. As far as, being called Agent Carter, that was something that was new for us when we did our cosplay and people were calling us Matt or Elektra. I mean, I'm assuming you're used to it at this point, like getting called by, but like for us, like it definitely took a little getting used to. And there were definitely people who were like, Matt, and I, didn't even register.
I said, hey, they're talking to you.
I had I did have a couple people at the G.I. Joe table who were very repeat visitors. Like everybody in that community knows each other. They're very, very kind, very small and insular. But at one point we had kind of like a new guy come up and I was in my Scarlet and I forget which version I was in. I have about 8 for her. And one of my buddies kept saying, was teasing me. I'm sitting on the table and he's like, oh, Carter, get your gams off the table. And so we're all laughing and calling me Peggy and everybody's looking at me. And this one guy goes, well, why are they calling you Peggy? You dressed as Scarlet. I'm like, because that's my name, you ape. It was just like, I was exhausted and it was just like, and I shouldn't have even been that rude, but I was just like, I'm tired. That's a silly question.
I want to jump back for a second because you talked about the the community of cosplayers, which is an awesome thing, and then also some of the competition that happens as well. So I know there are actually cosplay. We were talking about this before we started recording, but there are actually cosplay contests at a lot of these shows.
Oh yes,
right. Do you think some of the competition comes from that piece of it?
Well, I mean, there is unfortunately a divide even in the. I don't compete. I don't believe that any of my costumes are up to competition standards simply because I would prefer to enter with something that I fully made myself. And even with my Captain Carter, I haven't yet made the trousers for her or the gaiters. I'm using, store-bought things. And I would like to enter her someday just because she is my biggest build and my favorite. But I would like to have the entire costume be something that I produced and I made. And with the craftsmanship competitions, which get intensely serious, not necessarily in a bad way, but the only things that you are not permitted to make yourself if it's craftsmanship judgment is your wig and your shoes. So it's a lot. I have a couple of friends who have entered and won the East Coast Championships at C2E2. They come and they compete at New York Comic Con. I've known a couple of the judges. They're all amazing people, but we're talking French seaming inside that no one's going to see. The judges will open up the piece and see it, but like these are details that no one is going to notice, and that's how hardcore the craftsmanship competitions get. Wow. And then there's competitions that are just for fun, and those are great too. I mean, there's positive and negative aspects about every single one of these competitions. As somebody with intense anxiety, I do not compete even in the smaller competitions, especially if they're judged by applause, because I would explode in a cloud of red, white, and blue glitter if I was up there and there, like the magic hand is over my head and there's like a applause generator. I can't do it. I can't deal with it. Other people like it. They enjoy it. There are a bit of issues there sometimes because people claim that, especially if it's judged by audience participation, that's a lot of the time it will go to something topical or something funny and not really take into account the craftsmanship of the outfits. But I think that's kind of, the onus is on both parties there because yes, there should be attention paid to the craftsmanship of everybody's costume, but if you're in an audience participation contest and you're concerned that no one's noticing the craftsmanship of your work, enter the craftsmanship contest. Like I think it can go both ways on that.
Right.
But you will see the most stunning things if you go and watch them. I would advise just to go to watch at one point because between the actual outfits themselves to the stage presence alone. Like there are people that have won the crowd over because of stage presence. There is a really great cosplayer. Her name is Silhouette Cosplay. She does a brilliant Loki. She has made all of these things herself. Her stage presence is just electrifying. She just gets up on that stage and she is Loki. And it's so cool to watch. And it's just an experience to see these people get so into this thing that they've created from the fandom and the love of this character.
Yeah. No, I mean that passion and to see it, translated so literally into, into a costume and a performance. And then some cosplayers, I mean, they make careers out of this, right?
Oh, yes.
I mean, how, like they get paid to go to these shows? Is that how it works? Or
well, it's a long road to get up there. I would actually recommend if you wanted to know more about that because I can't really speak to it. I do this for fun. I don't ever do this for money, and it's kind of the way I like it because I don't want this to become so stressful that it's no longer fun for me.
Right.
There is a cosplayer. His name is Canvas Cosplay on Instagram. He's a wonderful individual, so talented. He does this for a career. He just released a book about it, actually, and it really, really explains very well how much work goes into it and how much you're going to go into debt before you actually start to see profit on it, because it's materials, it's travel, it's time.
Yeah.
You can't just waltz in to a place and say, oh, hi, I'm a cosplayer. I want to, be a guest at your show. Like, that's not how it works. Self-promotion is so difficult. And I'm terrible at promoting myself because I am so self-conscious. You kind of have to be, as you said about the charity things, it's easier when people are coming to you, but on that front, they're not.
So, the time is flying by, but I'm
so sorry. That's my fault.
No, this is great. This has been so much fun. But I want to make sure that we talk about, I know you said you have, there's a reason behind, each of the characters you've chosen. Is there maybe one in particular you want to kind of lay out for us? Because I would love to know sort of the motivation behind why you chose to be Agent Carter or Winter Soldier.
Well, the Winter Soldier and the Widow are very similar, and Captain America and Agent Carter are very similar. And I don't know how personal you're comfortable with me getting on these things, but Agent Carter especially, and to a lesser extent Captain America, I went through a rather brutal divorce. My mom died when I was about 20 years old, and I've never kind of felt right since after that. And I've always been sort of, looking for acceptance, wanting to please people, wanting to, it's not a crime to want to be special. Everybody wants to be special. But so I will say, and I'm saying this as plainly as I can, after my divorce and the subsequent falling out, it was very traumatic experience for me for reasons I won't get into here. Not simply because it was a divorce, but because of the manner in which it was executed. There was the quote unquote custody battle where we did not have children, but I say that as in friends and places that we used to go together and things like that. So it was very difficult for me. I ended up I lost my apartment. I, lost my job. I lost everything. I was in a state that I had not planned on living in. Was lucky enough to have family who loved me and friends who loved me that were giving me places to stay, but I was very lonely and was not, all the millions of friends purportedly in the cosplay world that I thought I had, they were kind of ghosting me at that point because my ex-husband was very needy and demanding of a lot of attention, and kind of nobody thought about how I was handling it. So, that happens. It does. So I was quite lonely, and I kind of just thought, you know what? That's it. I'm going to do this. My parents went out, and I was going to set my hair and have a bath, and then, I was going to kill myself. And before I did that, I thought, let me, have the last thing that I experienced be something I loved, very much media-wise. So I watched the first Avenger, and I thought, okay, so Captain America goes down with in the Valkyrie, assuming that he's going to just save everybody and that it's over, but it's not over. He wakes up 70 years later and everything's gone, and everyone he loves is gone, and everything is new and frightening and scary. And he has to deal with that. And Agent Carter is left behind in the 40s, and he's gone. And she has to go back home to stand behind the men again without her captain, without her war, not really fitting in anywhere. And I was like, okay, they experienced the biggest loss ever in the upheaval of their lives, and they haven't given up. So maybe I should not give up. And that was kind of when I got very serious about the two of them. And Peggy especially has been I had an eating disorder. I have body dysmorphia. And to find out that these 1940s clothes complement my body type so much better than what's kind of out there modern-wise now, and being in contact with other Agent Carter cosplayers, other people in the vintage community, the wonderful people at Besame Cosmetics who have become so much fun and so important to me doing this character and doing this cosplay. It's done so much for my confidence and my trying to learn to love my own beauty, and as the agent says, know my value. It's so important. And on the opposite side of that, I went through a lot with this divorce. I have bipolar disorder. I'm currently medicated. I'm in treatment. It's fantastic. But there were times when we had to figure out what worked and what didn't, and what medications weren't helping, and the outside stresses of my jobs, my divorce, everything, the social issues that come with that. So there have been times that I have not been proud of my own behavior, and I'm not crazy about the way my life went. And I feel like I'm scarred and traumatized, and there are things in my past that are always going to be there. They're never, they've changed my life for better or worse. So I always think about the Black Widow saying that there's red in my ledger. And I think about the soldier and all of the things that he did, not under his own control, but when he was pushed back against the wall. And their thing was survival, both of them. things they weren't proud of, but, trying to turn everything around. Bucky in the comics eventually becomes Captain America for a while, and the Widow defects from the KGB to S.H.I.E.L.D. And it's about redemption for them. It's about, dealing with the past, knowing that the past is not the future, and kind of just building on that and moving on from that. So that's why the two of them are so special to me, which is a little bit of a contrast as to why Steve and Peggy are so special to me. But all of those, I love those characters so well, and I do those cosplays for the majority now because I feel like there's pieces of all of them that somehow make me up as like a cosplayer and as a fan.
Well, no, I mean, that's so incredibly powerful. And I mean, we appreciate you, sharing something, that personal.
Yeah, that's amazing that you did turn your life around and everything. And that it's nice to hear that, these stories, these characters have, can touch people's lives. And you're not the first person to say that, that
I'm sure I won't be the last either.
Comics has, in a way, saved people's lives because, even these characters with superpowers are still human, or even if they're alien, they're people.
They're people. They feel things. I mean, I even feel that way about Hawkeye. He's always made fun of as the Avenger with no superpowers, and he's still a person, still a hero. He still goes through all of that. I was lucky enough to get the chance to tell Ms. Haley Atwell a little bit of that story. I got a autograph and a photo op with her. And I asked her handler, can I give her this letter that I've written her? And he was like, let me go ask. And he goes and asks, and he comes back with this adorable smile and a thumbs up. He's like, yeah, you can give it. So I gave him the letter, and I get up there. And a fan had brought her a tray of cupcakes, red, white, and blue cupcakes, which of course she couldn't eat, poor thing. Not wrapped. She was also filming Conviction at the time, and I think she was supposed to be a character with a cocaine addiction. So she probably had to drop weight for that. She's exhausted. She was so kind to every single person in that line. And I was very impressed with her professionalism because I could tell she was wiped out, and she was still so engaging and so funny and so kind to everyone. So I get up there and I'm trying so hard not to let my mouth fall down the stairs. And I was just like, Ms. Atwell, thank you so much for sharing your talent. And, the work that you've done and your portrayal of this character, honestly, it got me through the time in my life where I thought everything was over and I had lost everything. And, you told me my story wasn't over yet. And just thank you. You saved my life. She looks at me and she just goes, wow, would you like a cupcake? I go, yes, I would. It had red frosting. It was delicious. She was just adorable.
No, I'm glad that you were able to have that moment with her, and so happy that you kept moving forward and you turned all of that into something so positive. And that
I try. I don't know how well it's working out, but I'm still here.
But what it's doing for you personally, and then all of these people and the kids especially who are seeing what you're doing, I mean, that's a really wonderful thing.
I mean, I love it when people come up to me and tell me that they've been given hope or comforted or inspired by anything that I've done. I mean, it's moments like that are just so incredibly great. And then I think of what I almost did and how low I was, and I'm thinking, those moments wouldn't have happened if I had tagged out, so to speak. Right. And I have all these people coming up to me at New York Comic Con, even in the Winter Soldier, in my costumes that I'm not, that are rather new, and they're like, "Oh, are you Peggy Pincurls?" And that's so incredibly flattering to me because I've got low self-esteem and issues the way we all do, and I'm nobody. I'm just myself. I always say I'm just a kid from Brooklyn because I really am. But so they're like, "Oh, we love your Instagram. You've inspired me so much. It's so nice to see the things you post. Your personal stories really, really touch me, and it's great that you do that." And I'm like, thank you. It's such a nice thing to hear.
I want to make sure that we get to this aspect of it. Again, the hair, the makeup, the costume itself. I mean, I don't know. Do you want to take us through maybe one of the cosplays and just kind of break down what goes into it?
Sure. Which one?
I don't know. You pick. I mean, we've spoken a lot about the Agent Carter. So I mean, I feel like that would be fitting. But if there's one that you think,
well, I mean, do you want to talk more about one that I've made the most of myself, or the ones that are the most difficult to wear?
Steph, you pick.
Yeah.
I guess where you're styling your own hair and makeup and...
Okay, I can tell you that for a lot of my costumes, I wear custom wigs. They're actually made by a company called Hero Hair. They're great. Wearing a wig is not as easy as anyone makes it look.
Oh, no,
if you want to do it
not.
Right, I will say that. If you want to do it right. The prep itself for a wig, the kind of wig cap you use makes a difference. Whether or not you have a lace front wig makes a difference. I will always suggest lace fronts. What's really great is being vintage is the proper way to prep under a wig in theater and television is to use a pin curl set, which is exactly what women used in the 1940s to set their hair. And what I'm doing when I'm not in costume is I'm setting my hair in a 40s pin curl set. So I'm kind of well versed in that anyway. But it's how you avoid getting a wig headache, basically. You don't want to
So if you can explain what a pin curl is.
Sure. Yes, a pin curl. Yeah, sorry.
Our largely male audience.
I'm sorry. So basically a pin curl is it's a flat curl against your head that you wrap around 2 fingers until you get the curl laying flat against your head. You secure it with 2 bobby pins. And how you do that all over your head for a woman is how you would have the wig laying flat against your head, as opposed to braiding your hair in a crown or trying to wrap it up in a bun, which is going to put strain on your head, and it's going to have the wig not sit properly, and it's going to just be painful all around. I will say there are times for Peggy when I use my own hair. There have been times for the Winter Soldier that I've used my own hair, and it's 2 very, very different styles. I have spent a lot of time on vintage Facebook groups and watching YouTube videos from wonderful fashion bloggers like Miss Victory Violet or Miss Rockabilly Ruby about how to get my hair in that 1940s Victory roll or pin back with the big front swoop. And I actually have learned quite a bit. Now people are coming up to me on my Instagram and asking me how I do my hair, when 11 months ago I was sobbing with 2 Kirby grips in my hands, begging my Facebook group for advice and cheesecake because I just couldn't do it. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. But even with Carter, if I'm doing one of the dresses or the army uniform, there's a lot of foundation wear that goes into that. I wear corsets. I have the same products that they put on Ms. Atwell for the show from the specific company. There's garters involved. There's seam stockings. I want to make sure the shoes are right. A lot of her shoes are very painful. So, we get them stretched. We put moleskin in them. They have to be dyed, things like that. With Bucky, it's the heat. It's really that his costumes are grossly overheating. So I've got the arm on it. I swell up a lot. A lot of the clothes I've bought my costume for Bucky from another soldier, and so it was obviously made for a man. So it fits me a little differently. I'm having one custom made for myself right now that will hopefully fit me a bit better, but I just look like a hot mess. Luckily, it works for the character that I look like such a hot mess. But Captain America, I try to be a bit more polished and have that like shiny USO hawking war bonds kind of a thing for that. Captain America is probably the easiest to wear because it's very straightforward. The suit is it's 2 pieces. The gloves are a bit of a pain. The shield is about 8 pounds. Which is not a pain to carry for 3 hours if that's the first costume you're wearing. When it's the 4th day of the con and I've worn the Winter Soldier arm the entire day before, it's not as much fun to do that. But
sure.
I would have said the Widow would have been the most. I thought the Widow was going to be the most comfortable costume I had until I got into the corset and the boots. I can handle boots by themselves. I can handle a corset by itself. The 2 of those things together made me utterly, utterly miserable. But I love it. I love, doing the photos. I love getting the attention. But my friends found me in a corner of the Crystal Palace in the Javits Center, kind of sitting as well as I could with my head pillowed on my backpack. And my friends come up to me and they're like, oh, like, what happened to you? You were supposed to meet us 4 hours ago. And I just said, no more superhero landings, please. They were like, oh God, we gotta get some food in her.
Well, I got to say, it's been really wonderful talking to you. I mean, thank you so much for, sharing your story and your process and all of your work with these characters.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's been really a lot of fun.
I've been talking your ears off, poor old things.
It's been so interesting.
Listen, when you're doing a podcast, you want people who come on and talk. It's a lot harder if that's not the case.
No, this has been so much fun. And thank you both so much for having me and listening to my nonsense.
Yeah, no, not at all. It's really been a pleasure. So where can people find and follow you and see your cosplay photos and all that good stuff?
Yeah, I have an Instagram. That's probably where I'm the most active. I'm at Peggy Pincurls on Instagram. I do have a Facebook page as well, which is honestly tied to my Instagram. So if you've seen one, you've seen the other, but that is under Peggy Pincurls with the subcategory Scarlet J, which used to be my old stage name, which I kind of shoved into the middle as, for the problems I had earlier with the custody battle and everything. But I can be found on most social media platforms as Peggy Pincurls. Feel free to say hello. I mean, it's very nice to hear people appreciate my work. So if I'm at a con and you see me, please come up and introduce yourself. I love talking to people. So I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has about costume construction or makeup or hairstyling or wigs with what knowledge I've garnered over the years. I am no expert. That is a disclaimer. I'm no expert. There is no health plan.
Well, no, like I said, it's been awesome, talking to you and hearing about your journey. I want to thank you both for being part of this episode of My Comic Shop History. And to our listeners, so we'll be back with an all-new episode in 2 weeks with Jeff Beck, the owner of Eastside Mags in Montclair, New Jersey. But before that, 3 Patreon-exclusive episodes that you can listen to before the next episode of My Comic Shop History. So first up, available right now, is the after show for this episode. So Peggy, Steph, and I are going to keep talking. That after show is available right now. There is also the Patreon debut of My Comic Shop Book Club, which has previously been a sub-series of My Comic Shop History. It's moving over to Patreon. And the first episode also is available right now. It is a discussion of the DC works of writer Brad Meltzer. So that's available right now at the $1 a month level. And then 1 week from now, Wednesday, November 7th, there is the new installment of my Superman-themed spinoff, My Superfan History. That episode is a book club discussion of the Alan Moore classic, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. So again, new episode of My Comic Shop History in 2 weeks. In the meantime, there is the My Comic Shop History after show, available right now. The Brad Meltzer-themed episode of My Comic Shop Book Club, available right now. And the Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow book club episode of My Superfan History, available in 1 week. As we always say here, hesitation kills, so get on it. Thank you again to both of you for being part of this. Thank you to everyone for listening. Don't be a flat squirrel.